Why do you think lacrosse, professional lacrosse isn't as like popular then? Because obviously I love like rough and tough sports, and I think most Americans would. So I don't understand why it's not as popular.
Yeah, I mean that's the question that we're still trying to solve for, and I think it started getting, at least in America, it started getting fatiguing because at the youth level and in college, lacrosse started really doing this in the '90s and early 2000s, and then and for those who are listening, just kind of going up and to the right of interest. I was like gesturing on screen to Patty, and
Yeah.
and uh, and then the pro game was doing the opposite. And so you'll see in the film, there's this moment where my mother is actually talking about it. She was like, interviewed her, and she was like, "Yeah, it was disappointing, like watching him play in front of 55,000 people when he was in college, and then playing in front of 500 people when he was in the pros. Like, it shouldn't be like that, should it?"
No.
And she was like, "I kind of felt bad for him." And so why? Well, I think lacrosse had a lot of reputational damage that had been done to it, and those things are the hardest to change, right? Like the economics of a business and hiring good people, and you can build structure, but if you can't change like the general psyche around how they think about something, then it's not going to work. And I think the UFC had a similar shift in its culture, right? Brands I remember because I grew up with the rise of the UFC. Some of my partner brands, like a Red Bull or an Under Armour or even like a Chevy. I worked with all these different brands that at the time. I think like back in 2008, 2010, they were like, "Oh yeah, UFC's like really starting to take off, but we don't want to sponsor it because we're not sure like if it's too edgy or if someone's gonna like get hurt in the ring." And kind of like, boxing exists.
Yeah.
It reminds me also of like the feeling around Uber and Lyft when Uber first launched. There's always retractors, right? Like, oh, well, what happens if your driver takes you off to some area and whatever happens, or if you look at Airbnb, it's like, oh, I'm staying in someone else's home, and that someone else could be X, Y, or Z, and that's just all worst case scenario. It's how our minds work. So to be able to turn that reputationally is what we're working on now, because I think if we can, yeah, I think pro lacrosse can kick ass and be watched by millions of people any given weekend.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned there, 55,000 people are watching college games of it. But like as you
Oh,
say,
great.
college, it's big in college. Why do you think so
Yeah.
many great athletes commit to it, even though they know once they finish college that there's no money involved?
Well, for me at least, is because I was best at it. It's a great question because for the large part of my 20s, I was going, damn, man, I should play football, or I don't know if I could have gutted it out in basketball and made it to the NBA. I doubt that, but maybe soccer in the
Yeah.
US. And I was asked to go out for the Patriots at the time. Was asked if I was interested from Bill Belichick, who's a friend of mine, and we were kind of talking. And he's no stranger to recruiting lacrosse players because they kind of fit the kind of the dynamic athlete of a slot receiver or a safety. But I passed on all that because I just was so obsessed with lacrosse. I mean, you know what that feeling's like when you're really obsessed with something. And lacrosse came to me like relatively later in my life. I was playing basketball, soccer, and you name the sport. But I think when I think about passion, is it's actually not out there for us to find. It's within us, and we have these unique skill sets as human beings. We're not sure what they are, but if we're lucky enough to develop them, then we go, okay, for me, I just happen to be a really good lacrosse player. I think there are really good minds for becoming an accountant or a lawyer, business executive, an artist, a musician, a fighter, right? And if we're lucky enough to engage in that skill set alignment, it quickly becomes our passion, because things that we're passionate about are typically things that we're really good at. And then we're really good at something, we keep stoking that flame. If we become the best at something, I don't give a fuck if it's a lacrosse player or an accountant or an entertainer or a mother or an at-home father. When you're great at something, man, like nothing else really matters. You can be present there.